Some of you might know me because of a story I broke last March concerning something called the Guardians of the Looking Glass. Basically, what we had here is a technology that was built which would give those people who operated that technology, of course, a huge advantage because they could see and view timelines within a stream, within a field. You know, the awareness of this technology came to us through certain whistleblowers, and one of them was a guy by the name of Dan Burish, who went into some detail about how that technology was acquired. It starts at the end of the Second World War. It was the first time that the United States ever came into contact with certain ETs, you could say, who began appearing over the skies of the United States. And their appearance, again, was accompanied by crashes and captures of both the craft and the pilots piloting that craft. And it leads directly to the formation of the breakaway civilization, that which was created by one ultra secret society that was called Majestic 12. They who have ultimately come into possession of the Looking Glass material and time travel and other technologies ever since. So between 1947 and the early 50s, there were a series of crashes that took place, not just one, and they started the whole back engineering process. And they also had captured extraterrestrial beings. And the Looking Glass has ended up in S4 Area 51.
The program out at Area S4 consisted of 3 projects: Project Galileo, Project Sidekick, and Project Looking Glass. Project Galileo dealt with gravity propulsion. Project Sidekick dealt with a beam weapon that had a neutron source and was focused by a gravity lens. Project Looking Glass dealt with the physics of seeing back in time.
What they really discovered, in principle, is that the ETs are not really truly ETs. They're us from the future. They called them J-rods.
A long period of introduction into meeting, you know, say an ABE, an alien. I call him J-Rod, of course that's what they call him, but that wasn't his, you know, I don't know if that was his real name or not. That's the name that the linguist gave him. So he knew J-Rod.
Came from Zeta Reticuli, which is what we are going to colonize in the future. And they traveled back 52,000 and 45,000 years respectively.
State planet origin? Okay, yesterday you told us you traveled, and I quote, thousands of light years to get here. Yes. So you're human.
To exactly before this time, before this event takes place, for different reasons. What they found was that there are 3 types of beings. There's 2 J-rods, which were called P-52s. The P-52s were for 52,000 years in the future, and the P-45s were from 45,000 years in the future. And the P-45s weren't interested in helping us. They were just here to harvest genetic materials which they had lost over the course of tens of thousands of years of exposure. The P-52s also returned because they came back and they were trying to tell us our consciousness can affect our timeline. Not just the timeline, but also cosmic events. They were trying to tell us that the cosmic event, which is about to happen, can be affected by our collective consciousness. It's going to play out in 2 ways. It could end up with a timeline that prevails that's an organic timeline, where mankind will begin to wake up and en masse, and that we will change the trajectory of that course by raising our consciousness, and then there's going to be some event, and our change in consciousness will actually set in motion a positive version of how that event affects us. We've heard about ancient civilizations like Atlantis or Lemuria or Mu, and you know, they come and go. They always seem to end in some huge cataclysm or some destruction, some destructive event happens, society blows up. It's like a loop. Eventually, it would have to crack that loop. So maybe here is the chance to actually break that loop. And the other timeline they were talking about that may prevail is this transhumanist timeline. Along comes 2022, and it's been like 10 years since the last Looking Glass whistleblowers had been out there talking about it, Dan Bush and a few others. But this suddenly appeared, this group calling themselves the Guardians of the Looking Glass. We are the Guardians of the Looking Glass. We're a group of former intelligence officers and military officials who have come together to release classified information about future events to come. Our knowledge comes from our work on the Looking Glass artifact, first discovered in Iraq. During this time, the artifact was activated by the U.S. military and connected to computers. We were able to see dozens of future timelines and the convergent singularities that led to two possible outcomes by the year 2030. In one outcome, humanity awakens and the current order is dismantled, and an event occurs, and instead of this event being negative, it is a positive one. In the other outcome, the current structure remains in place, a nuclear war takes place along with many horrible events, then the event occurs, and instead of being a positive event, it's a negative one. I'm going to talk about what we can do about it, and that's got to do with the positive timeline. We have opportunity here. The J-Rods, they told us that basically they were talking about these two primary timelines. That there is a future where a possibly pole shift related environmental catastrophe is averted and does not happen. And relative to this different timeline, the future that generated the J-Rods as we know them will never evolve from our own, and we have taken a new path. So in this timeline, which also the Guardians saw, there is a probability of that happening, and so they talk about that as well. If the post-global pole shift environmental catastrophe does not occur, the benefits could be to alternatively produce a human consciousness, liberating evolutionary leapfrog, and a level of enlightenment among the masses that will produce a new set of future timeline trajectories that will compassionately steer the course of humanity into a virgin future of untold beneficial futures and heights, and in fact fulfill the original evolutionary directive to evolve consciousness of humanity to its optimum potential as future creative agencies in the universe. These messages that we got from these J-Rods decades ago are trying to reinforce that idea, and now we're starting to, maybe the reason this came up now is because we're kind of at that last moment where we could make it happen.